November 24th, 1940. A frozen airfield outside Manchester. The air smells of burnt oil and fear. Roy Chadwick stands 50 yards from the runway, watching his creation, the Avro Manchester, cough black smoke from its port engine. Again. The pilot inside is 23 years old, a volunteer who doesn't know this aircraft has already killed 2 of his predecessors. The starboard Rolls-Royce Vulture engine screams, then catches fire. Orange flames lick back from the cowling. The bomber lurches, drops, nearly clips the control tower before the pilot wrestles it down. When they pull him from the cockpit, his hands won't stop shaking. He looks at Chadwick and says nothing. He doesn't have to. The engineer who designed Britain's newest bomber has just watched it try to murder another pilot. His career, they're whispering in the Air Ministry halls, is finished. To understand why this moment represented an existential crisis, not just for one man, but for Britain's entire strategic bombing campaign, you need to go back 18 months earlier. By spring 1939, the Royal Air Force knew a brutal truth. They had no heavy bomber capable of reaching deep into Germany and returning home. The Armstrong Whitworth Whitley could barely carry 3,000 pounds. The Vickers Wellington was fabric-covered, vulnerable, underpowered. Hitler was rearming at a pace that terrified intelligence analysts. Britain needed a bomber that could haul massive ordnance loads across 1,000 miles, drop them with precision, and fight its way back through German night fighters. The Air Ministry specification, P-13/36, called for a twin-engined bomber with a 2,000-mile range and an 8,000-pound bomb load. It was an almost impossible brief. Roy Chadwick, chief designer at Avro Company, believed he could do it. He was 46 years old, self-taught, a man who'd learned aircraft design by studying birds in flight as a boy in Lancashire. He'd designed the Avro Anson, a reliable coastal patrol aircraft. Reliable, that word would haunt him. The Air Ministry wanted power, and Rolls-Royce promised it. The Vulture engine, a monstrous X-24 configuration 24-cylinder beast, theoretically capable of 1,760 horsepower. 2 of them would give the Manchester the muscle it needed. On paper, the math worked. In the air, the math caught fire. Roy Chadwick didn't come from privilege or formal engineering schools. He was born in 1993 in Farnworth, the son of a mechanical engineer who fixed textile looms. The boy learned to read blueprints before he learned Latin. At 14, he was apprenticed at Avro's tiny Brownsfield mill workshop, sweeping floors and watching the pioneers bolt fabric onto wooden frames. He absorbed everything. By 28, he was designing complete aircraft. His genius wasn't flashy, it was methodical, obsessive, grounded in an almost fanatical attention to structural integrity. Other designers chased speed. Chadwick chased reliability. He wanted planes that brought their crews home. The Manchester was supposed to be his masterpiece, a bomber with a cavernous 33-foot bomb bay, the largest ever designed into a British aircraft. He'd fought the Air Ministry for that bay, insisting that future bombs would be bigger, heavier, more devastating than anyone currently imagined. They thought he was mad. A bomb bay that large meant structural compromises, weight penalties, aerodynamic drag. But Chadwick had seen something in his mind, a hollow tube running through the fuselage, strong enough to carry the plane's structural loads while remaining empty, vast, ready. Ready for what, he didn't yet know. He just knew it mattered. The problem was the engines. The Rolls-Royce Vulture was a disaster wrapped in beautiful engineering theory. Take two V12 engines, combine them into an X24 configuration, share a single crankshaft, double the power without doubling the weight. Brilliant, except the crankshaft couldn't handle the torsional stress. The cylinder heads overheated, the connecting rods fractured, cooling systems failed, and when a Vulture failed, it didn't just quit, it caught fire, spewing flaming oil back across the wing. Pilots called them Vulture coffins. Between November 1940 and March 1941, the Manchester fleet suffered engine failure rates exceeding 40%. 12 aircraft were lost to engine fires, not enemy action. Crews refused to fly them. The Air Ministry, desperate for heavy bombers as the Blitz pounded London, had ordered 1,200 Manchesters. By early 1941, fewer than 60 were operational, and those 60 were killing their own pilots faster than the Luftwaffe could. Chadwick attended every crash investigation. He stood in muddy fields staring at twisted aluminum and blackened wings. The airframe was sound, everyone agreed on that. The fuselage structure was elegant, the controls responsive, the bomb bay revolutionary. It was just the engines, just, as if that word meant anything when men were burning. The Air Ministry summoned him in March 1941. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. They told him the Manchester program was cancelled. Rolls-Royce was abandoning the Vulture to focus on Merlin production. The 1,200 aircraft order was void. Avro would pivot to building Halifaxes under license, someone else's design. His bomber, his enormous bomb bay, his 3 years of work, scrap. They didn't say his career was over. They didn't have to. The chief procurement officer did say, almost as an afterthought, pity about that airframe. Lovely design, wrong engines. Chadwick took the train back to Manchester in silence. That night he sat in his drafting office with a bottle of whiskey and a set of calipers. Wrong engines. The phrase looped in his head. The airframe was right. The bomb bay was right. The structure was right. Only the engines were wrong. So change the engines. Impossible, of course. The Manchester was designed around 2 Vultures. Its wingspan was 80 feet. Its engine mounts, fuel systems, center of gravity, everything calibrated for 2 massive power plants hanging off those wings. You couldn't just bolt on different engines, could you? Chadwick pulled out the Manchester blueprints. He stared at the wing structure. 80 feet. The Rolls-Royce Merlin, the engine powering Spitfires and Hurricanes, produced 1,280 horsepower, reliable, proven, available. 2 Merlins would give him 2,560 horsepower. 2 Vultures were supposed to give him 3,520, but only when they weren't on fire. 4 Merlins would deliver 5,120 horsepower. 4. He measured the wing. If he extended the span to 102 feet, he could mount 4 Merlins with proper spacing, 2 per wing, outboard engines farther out to reduce asymmetric thrust if one failed. The center of gravity would shift slightly aft, but he could compensate by moving the bomb bay forward 6 inches. The tailplane might need enlargement for stability, but the fuselage, that glorious cavernous fuselage with its 33-foot bomb bay, could remain untouched. He sketched through the night. By dawn, he had rough calculations. By noon, he convinced his deputy, Stuart Davies, that it wasn't insane. By week's end, he had preliminary drawings. He called it the Manchester 3.
Later, they'd rename it, but first, he had to convince the Air Ministry to let him build it. They didn't want to listen. The Manchester name was poisonous, another Chadwick fantasy, one official called it. Britain was losing the bomber war. Germany's industrial heartland operated untouched, while Wellingtons burned over the Ruhr. The Americans weren't yet in the war. The Soviets were reeling. Bomber Command needed aircraft now, not experimental redesigns from a disgraced engineer. But Chadwick had an advocate, Roy Dobson, the managing director of Avro, a bulldog of a man who believed in his chief designer. Dobson stormed into the Air Ministry and made a case built on cold pragmatism. The Manchester production line existed, the tooling existed, the workers knew the airframe. Switching to Halifax production would cost 6 months and retooling expenses Britain couldn't afford. Give Chadwick 90 days to prove the 4 Merlin redesign. 90 days. If it failed, they'd scrap it and build Halifaxes. If it succeeded, Britain would have a heavy bomber by autumn. 90 days. The Air Ministry, desperate and out of options, agreed. Chadwick worked like a man possessed. He slept in the factory, eating cold sandwiches at his draughting table. The wing extensions required 11,000 new rivets per aircraft. The engine mounts needed complete redesign. The Merlins' mounting points didn't align with the Vultures. The fuel system now fed 4 engines instead of 2, requiring new pumps, lines, cross-feed valves. The electrical system needed 4 separate generator circuits. The hydraulics, the controls, the instrument panel, everything touched by the engine change had to be recalculated, redrawn, rebuilt. And that bomb bay, Chadwick protected it like a sacred thing. Engineers argued for reducing its size to save weight, to shorten the fuselage, to improve speed. He refused. 33 feet, unobstructed, capable of holding a single bomb weighing, theoretically, up to 22,000 pounds. No other aircraft in the world had a bay that large. "We'll need it," he kept saying. "Trust me, we'll need it." They thought he was mad. The first prototype, officially designated Avro Type 683 Manchester 3rd, rolled out on October 31, 1941, exactly 89 days after authorization. The wingspan stretched 102 feet, 22 feet wider than the Manchester. 4 Merlin XX engines, each producing 1,280 horsepower, hung from the wings in elegant nacelles. The aircraft weighed 36,900 pounds empty, could carry 14,000 pounds of bombs, and, on paper, had a range of 2,530 miles. On November 9, test pilot Sam Brown climbed into the cockpit. Chadwick watched from the ground, the same spot where he'd watched Manchester's burn. Brown pushed the throttles forward. All 4 Merlins roared in perfect synchronization, a sound like massed orchestral power, nothing like the uneven scream of dying vultures. The bomber rolled, lifted, climbed cleanly into the grey November sky. It stayed up. No smoke, no flames, no lurching asymmetry. Brown flew for 47 minutes, testing stalls, engine cuts, maximum power climbs. When he landed, he didn't shake, he grinned. "Flies like a bloody dream," he told Chadwick. "Stable, responsive, powerful. This is it. This is your bummer." And this is where the story takes a turn no one expected. But before we get to that, if you're finding this untold history as fascinating as I am, drop a comment below. Which aircraft do you think was the real game changer of World War II? And hit that like button. It tells YouTube to recommend this to more history lovers like you. The Air Ministry, stunned that Chadwick had actually delivered, ordered immediate production. They renamed it. The Manchester name was dead weight. In January 1942, the aircraft officially became the Avro Lancaster. By March, the first operational Lancasters joined No. 44 Squadron at RAF Waddington. Crews who'd flown Manchesters and survived couldn't believe the difference. The Lancaster was stable, forgiving, absurdly reliable. 4 engines meant redundancy. Lose 1, even 2, and you could still fly home. The bomb bay, that enormous hollow tube Chadwick had fought for, now revealed its purpose. Standard bomb loads, 14 1,000-pound bombs, or 6 2,000-pounders, or 1 4,000-pound cookie blockbuster plus incendiaries. But Chadwick kept asking, what's the largest bomb we could physically fit? The answer would rewrite strategic bombing. By late 1942, Bomber Command faced a brutal problem. Germany had buried critical infrastructure, submarine pens, underground factories, V-weapon sites under reinforced concrete 20 feet thick. Standard bombs bounced off. You needed a weapon that could penetrate deep before exploding, a bomb that fell like a meteor and detonated underground, collapsing structures from within. Barnes Wallis, the maverick engineer at Vickers, had designed such a weapon, the Tallboy, a 12,000-pound earthquake bomb shaped like a streamlined dart. Dropped from 18,000 feet, it would reach near supersonic speeds before impact, punching through concrete like a bullet through paper. The problem, no Allied bomber could carry it. The B-17 maxed out at 8,000 pounds. The Halifax's bomb bay was too short. The Sterling was too slow, couldn't climb high enough. Wallis ran the calculations and realized with horror that only one aircraft in the entire Allied arsenal could do it. Chadwick's Lancaster, the bomber that started as a failure, now became the only platform for the most destructive conventional bomb ever built. The Tallboy was 21 feet long. The Lancaster's bomb bay was 33 feet. It fit with room to spare, but barely. The bomb's fins protruded slightly into the airstream, requiring modified bay doors. The weight, 12,000 pounds, was manageable, but carrying it to 18,000 feet while crossing into Germany required stripping the aircraft down, remove mid-upper gun turret, reduce crew, minimize fuel load, lighten everything. On March 8, 1943, a modified Lancaster from No. 617 Squadron dropped the first operational Tallboy on the Saumur railway tunnel in France, a critical German supply route. The bomb fell for 43 seconds, accelerating to 750 miles per hour. It hit the hillside 60 feet from the tunnel entrance and detonated 100 feet underground. The explosion wasn't loud, it was geological, a shock wave through bedrock that collapsed 12,000 tons of earth and rock into the tunnel, sealing it completely. German engineers needed 8 months to clear it. 8 months, one bomb, one Lancaster. No other aircraft in the world could have delivered it. Now here's something most documentaries won't tell you. Wallis wasn't done. He designed an even bigger monster, the Grand Slam, a 22,000-pound earthquake bomb, the largest conventional weapon of the war. 26 feet long, 10 feet in circumference, filled with 9,136 pounds of Torpex explosive. Dropped from 22,000 feet, it would hit at supersonic speed and penetrate 130 feet underground before exploding. The blast could collapse bunkers, viaducts, or underground factories from within. Only one aircraft could possibly carry it. Chadwick's Lancaster, the bomber that started as a failure, now became the only platform for the most destructive conventional bomb ever built. On March 14, 1945, a specially modified Lancaster from No. 617 Squadron dropped the first Grand Slam on a
617 Squadron, piloted by squadron leader Charles Calder, dropped the first Grand Slam on the Bielefeld Railway Viaduct in Germany. The bomb hit the earth 100 yards from the viaduct. The crew thought they'd missed. Then the shockwave arrived, a subterranean earthquake that shattered 7 arches of the massive stone structure, dropping them into the ravine below. The viaduct, which had survived years of conventional bombing, was destroyed in one strike. By war's end, Lancasters had delivered 854 Grand Slams and Tallboys combined, collapsing submarine pens, V-2 launch sites, and rail networks that conventional bombing couldn't touch. If you want to go deeper into the engineering secrets behind these weapons, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We're covering the stories that textbooks skipped. The Lancaster's combat record speaks in cold numbers. Between 1942 and 1945, 7,377 Lancasters were built. They flew 156,000 sorties, dropped 608,612 tons of bombs, two-thirds of Bomber Command's entire ordnance tonnage. Lancaster crews faced horrific losses, 3,249 aircraft destroyed in combat, a loss rate of 2.1% per mission. Over a standard 30-mission tour, a Lancaster crew had a 44% chance of being killed. But the aircraft itself earns something rare in wartime, the trust of its crews. Pilots loved it. The Lancaster could absorb catastrophic damage and keep flying. Aircraft returned with engines blown off, tail sections shredded, entire sections of fuselage torn away. One famous photograph shows Lancaster S for sugar with a 6-foot hole blown through its wing. It flew home. Rear gunners froze at -40 degrees in their Perspex turrets, but they knew their Lancaster would get them back if anything could. The aircraft became legend during Operation Chastise, the Dambusters raid of May 1943, when 19 Lancasters from No. 617 Squadron attacked German dams using Barnes-Wallis's bouncing bombs. The operation required flying at 60 feet above water at precisely 232 miles per hour, releasing a 9,000-pound cylindrical bomb that would skip across the reservoir surface and sink against the dam wall before exploding. The precision required was inhuman. 8 Lancasters were lost, 53 crew members died, but the Moan and Eder dams were breached, releasing 330 million tons of water that devastated German industry in the Ruhr Valley. The Lancaster, designed in 90 desperate days, had just pulled off the most technically demanding bombing raid in history. It's impossible to hear these stories without feeling something: anger, awe, sadness, all of it. Let me know in the comments how you're processing this, and if you believe these forgotten engineers deserve to be remembered. That like button is how we make sure their stories don't disappear. But Roy Chadwick never sought glory. He remained at Avro throughout the war, refining the Lancaster, solving problems, answering letters from pilots who loved his aircraft. He was shy, soft-spoken, a man more comfortable with slide rules than speeches. When the war ended and the honours came, he was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 1943. He deflected credit to his team, to the factory workers, to the Merlin engine. He began designing the next generation, the Avro Lincoln, a long-range heavy bomber for the Pacific War that ended before it saw combat, and then the Avro Tudor, a civilian airliner. On August 23, 1947, Chadwick boarded a prototype Tudor II at Woodford Aerodrome for a test flight. The aircraft was overweight, the center of gravity miscalculated. During takeoff, the pilot lost control. The Tudor crashed into a field and exploded. Roy Chadwick died instantly. He was 54 years old. The man who'd saved Britain's bombing campaign, who'd designed the aircraft that carried the war to Germany's heartland, who'd turned disaster into legend, died testing an airliner that would never enter production. The irony is unbearable. The Lancaster outlived him. After the war, many were converted for civilian use: transport aircraft, aerial survey platforms, search and rescue. The last operational RAF Lancaster retired in 1963. Today, only 2 remain airworthy, one in Canada with the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum, one in the UK with the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. When they fly at air shows, the sound stops crowds. 4 Merlin engines in thunderous harmony, a noise that survivors recognize instantly. For bomber crews, it's the sound of youth and terror and survival. For engineers, it's the sound of a 90-day miracle. For Roy Chadwick's descendants, it's the sound of a man who refused to accept failure, who saw potential in disaster, who believed that a huge, empty bomb bay might someday matter. Wars end, engineers die, blueprints yellow and tear, but the ideas, they survive. Every time someone pivots from failure, every time a designer trusts their instincts against institutional skepticism, every time an impossible deadline is met by sheer obsessive will, that's Chadwick's legacy. The Manchester was a failure, the Lancaster was a legend. The only difference was 90 days and the courage to try something everyone said was impossible. Chadwick never wrote a memoir, he never gave speeches about his genius, he just built aircraft that brought people home. This is just one engineer's story, there are dozens more. The designers behind the Mosquito, the Spitfire, the Merlin engine itself. Names history barely remembers, machines that shaped the world. I've got their stories ready for you. The next video covers the engineer who turned a race car engine into a fighter plane legend, and trust me, that one will change how you see the Battle of Britain. Click that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one. The engineer they told to quit, the bomber that refused to fail, the legacy that still flies.